know a lot about Peregrine and this mission. Why is that?
Well, every day I've had a front row seat at Peregrine under construction. I work at the Moonshot Museum, and we share a wall of windows with Astrobotic. And better yet, I've seen kids with their faces pressed against the glass, knowing they're going to grow up to become that next generation of makers that take us to the moon.
That's fantastic. And you also brought us some props here. So these are different parts, different materials that make up the multi-layer insulation. That's what goes around the spacecraft, right?
Right. That's the thermal protective space blanket for the craft. And we have a number of different materials here. This is Astro Quartz. It's a woven ceramic fiber, very heat resistant. We've got aluminum, which is great for reflecting solar heat. And this is also aluminum. Glitters a little more like gold, but
yes.
It's just aluminum that's been covered with a polymer called Kapton. And you can see it actually on our model here. We have of the Peregrine lander.
Right here. This is the multi-layer insulation.
Yeah, we've got the multi-layer insulation, and that's wrapping these fuel tanks, kind of like cosmic baked potatoes.
And why do we need all these different materials?
Well, the moon is a harsh environment, and it takes a lot of technical know-how to land there. There's no atmospheric blanket like we have on Earth. So we need a thermal space blanket to protect against wild temperature extremes. Boiling hot days, freezing cold nights, several hundred degrees below zero, and Peregrine's been engineered to endure that.
Okay, so now we know how it will be protected during landing. How will it land? What technologies are we using to make sure that it lands safely when you say that the moon isn't the easiest place to land on?
Right, and that's my favorite part of the story because this robot is going to land itself. Because we have about a 2.5 second signal delay from the Earth to the moon and back, it's like having a self-driving car going to another world. We have a full suite of sensors, gyroscopes, Doppler, LiDAR, star trackers, and a really cool technology called Terrain Relative Navigation, or TRN. About 9 miles out, Peregrine will activate its camera, and as it's descending, and the camera is taking pictures, the computer will be playing kind of a high-speed game of flashcards. Comparing those pictures to 3D maps, and then Peregrine will have to make decisions in order to come to a landing. We're going to test drive this technology on Peregrine, and then on Astrobotic's next lunar lander, Griffin, TRN will be in the driver's seat when we head to the moon's south pole.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I know Griffin is going to be delivering another NASA payload, so another partnership where we get to do this together.
Yeah, I think another great example of how CLIPS is bringing together entrepreneurship and accelerating the pace of science and taking us out into the solar system.
Mike, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so the Astrobotic team hopes to land on the near side of the moon on February 23rd in a place called the Bay of Stickiness, a lunar feature formed by ancient hardened lava flow. It's located outside of the Gruithuisen domes, which is the largest dark spot on the moon. Why does NASA want to conduct science here? Well, on Earth, formations like these domes need significant water and also plate tectonics to form. But without these key elements on the moon, lunar scientists have been left to wonder how the domes formed and evolved over time. We'll, of course, have coverage of the landing on our NASA Plus app or whichever social platform you watch us on. Now, earlier in the show, we told you about the NERVIS payload from NASA's Ames Research Center. The other payload from Ames is the Neutron Spectrometer System, or NSS.
I'm Rick Elphick. I'm the principal investigator of the Neutron Spectrometer System aboard the Peregrine 1 lander. NSS measures neutrons coming out of the lunar soil, and the neutrons tell you a lot about the makeup of the lunar soil. The neutrons that we measure with the neutron spectrometer are specifically related to the presence of hydrogen, the H in H2O, or water, and that's its real purpose, is to locate water, to actually act as a divining rod. Peregrine will be landing in a location where we really don't expect very much water, if any at all. But it's an interesting experiment. The exhaust system of its descent engines will actually spray paint the surface with its exhaust. And part of that exhaust is water, and some of that water is actually going to stick onto the surface of the moon. Then after we land, NSS can monitor how that water goes away as the sun rises at the landing site and the day gets warmer and warmer. Water is really important as a resource for exploration. Astronauts need it for drinking water, but you can also use it by splitting it up into hydrogen and oxygen as rocket fuel. So if you can find water in place where you're going to, that means you can use it there and not have to bring it up from Earth.
Now, NASA has 2 more payloads flying to the moon today. We're going to tell you about both of them in just a few minutes. But first, let's introduce you all to Chris Culbert, Program Manager for CLPS out of NASA's Johnson Space Center. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Megan. Thank you. It's a wonderful day.
It is. We just watched the launch. What did you think?
It was amazing. Oh, my God. What a wonderful feeling. That rocket was gorgeous.
Yeah, and so NASA has 5 payloads hitching a ride. Tell me about the different things that they'll be studying and why they're studying those things.
So this early mission for CLPS, this is our first mission. So our first 2 early missions are mostly carrying small instruments that help us learn more about the environment at the moon. As we get further into CLPS in future missions, we'll raise the complexity and start studying more complex, more difficult questions. But at the beginning, we're mostly trying to characterize what the moon is like, what the radiation does, what kind of environment we can find there. It doesn't have an atmosphere, but there's particles and dust and other things. We're trying to get more information about that so that we can help guide future human missions more effectively.
And how soon could we see data from some of those instruments so that we can start creating that fuller picture?
We'll start getting data back within hours of landing on the moon.
Wow.
Now, the scientists will need some time to analyze that information and turn it into the kind of information that helps guide future missions. But we should be getting data back from the moon within a few hours of landing, and we'll all the way for as long as 14 days on the moon. We'll be gathering that data. But the scientists will then take that information offline and analyze it for a while.
So basically these missions, these instruments that we're sending, they're scouting the moon for us.
Yes. Yeah, they're telling us what the moon is like, helping us understand what we need to know so that we can take humans there safely. It also allows us to better design future instruments and other experiments that will pinpoint the kinds of things we need to know about the moon to be able to work and live there.
Chris, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're now less than a few minutes away until the Peregrine spacecraft separates from Vulcan's Centaur upper stage. We're going to go back to ULA for that milestone, but before that, another quick status update on Peregrine from Olivia.
Thanks, Megan. And now I'm checking in on Astrobotic's mission control team. In about 20 to 30 minutes, they're expecting Peregrine to power on and then try to communicate with them on the ground. Peregrine will establish ground communications with NASA's Deep Space Network, and then we will begin receiving telemetry. As we wait for those milestones, here's an in-depth look at the inner workings of the Peregrine lunar lander.
And now we'll take a look at the Peregrine spacecraft. You'll notice that we've removed the MLI or multi-layer insulation so we can better see the inside of the spacecraft. Throughout Peregrine's journey, they'll keep an eye on the spacecraft's temperatures, pressures, power levels, and communications system. Solar panels at the top of Peregrine charge its batteries to power the spacecraft. Moving down towards the center of the spacecraft are the payload decks. You'll notice the decks have a unique isogrid pattern that we've used as an inspiration for a lot of our graphic design for the mission. This structure pattern optimizes the sturdiness of the payload decks while also minimizing its weight. Affixed to these decks are all 20 payloads. 20 individual pieces of cargo from 7 different countries are aboard these 2 main decks. Peregrine has 12 attitude control system engines, called thrusters, that are used to orient the spacecraft. You can see 4 large propellant tanks filled with monomethyl hydrazine and multiple mixtures of oxygen-nitrogen, or MON, as oxidizer. Mounted to the bottom of the spacecraft are 5 main engines that will slow the craft down as it approaches the lunar surface. These engines use a hypergolic bipropellant pressure-fed system. Believe it or not, Peregrine will use the majority of its fuel in the last 15 minutes of the mission as we attempt a soft landing on the lunar surface. Peregrine has 4 landing legs attached to its base. These legs have a honeycomb structure on the inside that will crush to absorb the impact of Peregrine landing on the lunar surface. Peregrine is designed for an autonomous landing. That means it will use complex computing and a suite of sensors instead of human pilots. There are 2 antenna relays and a high-power transponder to relay communications between the spacecraft and the Astrobotic team. The relay will connect Peregrine with NASA's Deep Space Network, or DSN, utilizing the same dishes that communicate with the James Webb Space Telescope as well as other historic missions.
And the last major feature of Peregrine is something you can't see. It's the hundreds of people who have worked on, tested, and gotten the spacecraft to the launch pad today. A shout out to the team we like calling the Astrobots, and a shout out to our payload customers who are sending their items to the moon with us. Your continued commitment to science and lunar exploration is important for humanity. The Peregrine lunar lander has 20 pieces of cargo called payloads aboard. You can find the full manifest on Astrobotic's website, but here is a look at a few of the payloads. IRIS rover. This is a student-built rover with a mission to take photos and send them back to Earth as it drives across the lunar landscape. Once Peregrine lands on the moon, IRIS will deploy to the surface to begin its mission. And here we have another Carnegie Mellon University payload called Moonark. Moonark is seen as a cultural museum to the moon. Comprised of 4 independent chambers and weighing a combined total of 10 ounces, it contained hundreds of images, poems, music, nano-objects, and earthly samples. Next, we have Colmena, a fleet of micro-rovers and the first Latin American scientific instrument ever sent to the moon. Consisting of 5 small rovers, it will demonstrate a coordinated moon exploration. Lastly, we have the DHL Moonbox. Former astronaut Richard Garriott and thousands of others from around the world have sent small mementos to link life's meaningful moments with our nearest celestial neighbor. Now, this is just a snippet of the 20 payloads aboard Peregrine. Again, you can find the full list on Astrobotic's website. Now back to Megan.
We are now less than 10 minutes away from Peregrine separation, so let's get back over to the ULA team and Amanda Sterling to take us through that.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to those of you who are still following mission progress of ULA's Vulcan Cert-1 flight. For those who are just tuning in, I'm Amanda Sterling, and I'm here at ULA's Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. ULA's inaugural Vulcan rocket lifted off on its first flight test at 2:18:38 a.m. Eastern, and all systems continue to operate nominally.
One minute, 1 second burn. And we've begun pressurizing the propellant tanks in preparation for second burn. Coming up on LH2 pre-start. LH2 pre-start.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T+ 43 minutes, 8 seconds. Coming up next is the second main engine start of ULA's Centaur upper stage. Let's listen in.
Change to the start position, everything looking good. About 15 seconds to mess. We have ignition, full thrust, 2 good engines. Everything looking good.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T+ 43 minutes, 57 seconds. As we approach Peregrine separation, let's learn more about the first spacecraft to launch in NASA's new CLPS initiative to have American companies send its science experiments to the moon.
Astrobotic is a full-service lunar company. It starts with our terrestrial testing and development services that can build propulsion systems and test propulsion systems on Earth, to the sensors that make precision landing possible, to our rovers that will deploy down on the surface of the moon, to one day our power systems that will deploy on the moon and provide sustaining power for infrastructure on the surface. Astrobotic is in all of those businesses, and we are in the business of making space accessible to the world, and the moon is just the beginning. The big thing that we're known for is our 2 lunar missions to go to the surface of the moon. Our first one is about to launch, and our second one flies in 2024. The Peregrine mission is important because it's among the first commercial missions to return to the surface of the moon. This is the first time as a nation going back since Apollo. It's the first time for 6 nations that could land on the surface of the moon with our mission. This is the dawn of a new era of affordable, routine, regular access to the surface. What that means is our nations and world scientists can access the moon on a routine, regular basis. They don't have to wait for the culmination of their career for one single super mission. They can go back again and again and again. It's the beginnings of learning about the resources on the surface of the moon and potentially one day turning those resources into something that we can use in space and maybe one day return back here to Earth.
Peregrine's development was a years-long process that included many people, like engineers, welders, and technicians, who designed and built the spacecraft. Landing a spacecraft on the moon is very complex. The team worked long hours to get Peregrine to the launch pad.
To be on the pad today with our spacecraft strapped to a giant 200-foot tall launch vehicle ready to blast into the heavens it's a little surreal. It's a moment I've been dreaming about for 16 years. And to see it all on one rocket, it's terrifying and exciting and thrilling all at once.
Our Peregrine lunar lander starts its journey to the moon in Florida on a Vulcan launch vehicle. That will blast us into translunar injection, heading us straight out to the moon, where we will enter lunar orbit and start our descent down to the surface. At this point, engines are firing, all eyes are tuned in, and as we soft touch down on the surface of the moon, that marks the beginning of our surface operations and our payloads deploying.
As a nation and as a company, as individuals, we all persevere to overcome challenges, and we're going to continue to do that. And this first mission is just our first step, our first attempt to make space accessible to the world, and it certainly will not be our last.
Pressures.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T+ 47 minutes 8 seconds. We're a few seconds from the second main engine cutoff. Here's Rob Gannon.
30 seconds to nominal MECO. Seconds. And we're going to open loop on PU. Coming up on cutoff. We have cutoff. Everything is looking good. And we are now in a 2-minute 49-second coast phase of spacecraft separation. We've got full settling going after MECO. And we're reorienting to spacecraft SEP attitude. And continue to maneuver to our MES-2 attitude. And we're inside a 1.5 minutes to spacecraft separation. Body rates are nulling out. And this mission does call for a roll spin for spacecraft separation of 0.5 degree per second. We'll be starting that maneuver shortly.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 50 minutes 10 seconds. Vulcan has executed all mission events expected, and we are now approaching delivery of the Astrobotic Peregrine commercial lunar lander into a highly elliptical orbit, more than 220,000 miles above Earth to intercept the moon. Let's return to flight commentator Rob Gannon as we approach separation.
We are spinning down. And we are now in a 28-minute coast period, the third burn of Centaur.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 51 minutes 6 seconds. We just heard confirmation of Peregrine spacecraft separation. I'm now back with ULA President and CEO Tori Bruno. Tori, our first Vulcan rocket just delivered its first payload to orbit. How are you feeling?
Yeehaw! I am so thrilled. I can't tell you how much.
Absolutely. And again, we're not completely done with the mission here today. Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience?
I am so proud of this team. Oh my gosh, this has been years of hard work. So far, this has been an absolutely beautiful mission back to the moon and off to our next burn, where we will do our final payload deployment to that heliocentric orbit for the memorial. Our team has done such a good job. Bravo, Zulu to everyone. This is just, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that too. So again, thank you so much for joining us on our show. Congratulations, and we'll let you get back to finish the rest of the mission.
Congratulations to you. Give me a hug. All right.
Minutes 40 seconds. We're going to pass the broadcast back to the NASA team to continue mission coverage. We'll be joining back in as we approach the final engine burn. Over to you, Megan.
Thank you, Amanda, and well done, ULA team. So throughout the broadcast, we have been telling you about the 5 NASA payloads that are flying on this mission. We've shown you in depth 3 of them, and now we have the final 2. So NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center has 2 payloads aboard today's flight, and one of those is the Peregrine Ion Trap Mass Spectrometer, aka PITMAS. Its job is to understand the release and movement of lunar surface volatiles like water.
My name is Barbara Cohen. I am the principal investigator, or the lead of the science team, for the Peregrine Ion Trap Mass Spectrometer. PITMAS, the instrument I work on, is going to inform our understanding of the volatile cycle on the moon. That is water, carbon dioxide, methane, all sorts of fun molecules that we want to measure on the surface of the moon and in the lunar exosphere. So we are trying to learn about the water at the poles by going back to where it comes from, to the solar wind and micrometeorites that are coming in now, and understanding how much is there now, how much could be there in the future, how much was there in the past. We're interested in that atmosphere and what it's made out of, and that's what PITMAS will monitor. The reason it's so important to measure the lunar exosphere is because that is a process that's happening today that includes all of the things we're interested in for human exploration. Our Artemis program is going to the South Pole because there are resources there. If you don't have to bring your water with you, if you can use the water that's there, that saves you a lot of mass going up with your astronauts.
And the 5th and final NASA payload we want to show you is the Laser Retroreflector, or LRA. It's a unique type of mirror used to measure distance, and this is why it's so critical for future missions.
My name is Xiaolui Sang. I'm a LiDAR instrument scientist and also work on other laser instruments. The instrument is a laser retroreflector arrays. It's a small retroreflectors mounted on a shell, on aluminum shell, support shell. It retroreflects laser light back to where it came from. The purpose is to, number one, to have a fiducial marker, a precise fiducial marker on the lander so that we know exactly where that is on the lunar surface. It serves as a landmark for future missions if you want to go back and land it there. When you shine laser on it, and it reflects right back at you. So it doesn't matter which way you're looking at it. And so that will help us to range from orbit to the lander as it passes overhead.
All right, it's now been about 55 minutes since Vulcan and Peregrine lifted off from the Space Coast of Florida. Let's get back to Olivia and the Astrobotic team as they work to confirm acquisition of signal with their spacecraft.
Thanks, Megan. As you saw, we just got confirmation that the Peregrine spacecraft separated from the Vulcan rocket, and now we are waiting to establish a space-to-ground communications connection. We expect for this to take a few more minutes. This connection helps engineers in Astrobotic's Mission Control Center pass commands, receive telemetry, and determine the location of Peregrine in space. Peregrine will be utilizing NASA's Deep Space Network, or DSN, their 34-meter dishes in Australia, Spain, and California. These dishes are the same suite used to communicate with the James Webb Telescope, as well as other historic missions. So our flight director on console, Alex Van Hoven, will be calling out what is happening in Astrobotic's Mission Control Center. And now, as we look at Astrobotic's Mission Control Center, you can see the rows of our staff all monitoring the spacecraft. In the room today, we have three of six.
This is Mission Control Flight Director announcement. Repeat broadcast. This is Mission Control Flight Director with an announcement. The mission team is still waiting for communications with Peregrine with earliest AOS at 080905 UTC in approximate 2.5 minutes. To repeat, the mission team is still waiting for communication with Peregrine with the earliest AOS expected at 080905 UTC.
And folks, that was Alex Van Hoven, our flight director on console. He is calling out UTC times, or sort of space times, and we're waiting for that acquisition of signal with the Peregrine spacecraft.
Correction, earliest AOS at 0818 UTC. Earliest AOS at 0818 UTC.
Now you can almost see Alex Van Hoven in the back row, right below the eye in Astrobotic. You can kind of see his head. Maybe he'll stand up for us at least one time, we'll see. He's very focused and busy. Today we have 3 of 6 flight directors on console for launch. Once we establish communications with Peregrine and the spacecraft officially begins its journey towards the moon, the flight directors will work in shifts so there is always one present in mission control. I would ask them to all give a wave, but they're definitely laser focused on their screens, checking up on the spacecraft. Now Alex, he's giving us those live updates, and he is also senior aerospace engineer, and he oversaw the development of Peregrine's in-flight procedures. He developed his flight expertise as part of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center.
Broadcast, Mission Control Flight Director announcement. I repeat, broadcast, Mission Control Flight Director announcement. At this time, Astrobotic has confirmed that we have established communications with Peregrine, and we are now receiving live telemetry. I repeat, we have just established communications with DSN and can confirm that we are receiving telemetry from the satellite.
Now confirming, my goodness, we have received signal with the Peregrine spacecraft and we are communicating it with it here on Earth. You just heard it from Alex. The team will begin sending commands to Peregrine to continue its journey to the lunar surface. What an incredible day. Now, thank you so much for continuing to tune in with us to watch this historic launch of Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander on its journey to the moon. I'm Olivia Chapla with Astrobotic, and it is such a happy day for Astrobotic. I'm kind of speechless. So back to Megan at the hostess. Thank you very much.
Hey, congratulations, Olivia. I know that must have been really nerve-wracking to see such a big moment and it being finally here. So congratulations to her and the rest of the team. And actually right now here with me, I have Andy Jones, and he is the Director of Landers and Spacecraft for Astrobotic. And Andy, I saw you were over off the camera, but I saw you go, yes, as soon as we confirmed acquisition of signals. So talk us through that. How are you feeling?
Relieved. More than anything else, relieved. I mean, getting communication is just so important to everything else we want to try and do. So now I can start enjoying the moment, enjoying the excitement of getting into space.
Yeah, at least you didn't have to wait long. You know, there was a window, right? We got it right at the beginning of the possible window.
So just a credit to all the great work the team has done to actually get it, to acquire it so fast.
Yeah.
It's just a brilliant set of machine, brilliant people working on it. So
yeah,
very proud.
Yeah, what would you say to the team? You know, again, I know that you guys have been working on this for years. What would you say to them as it culminates in this moment right now?
Get back to work. No,
not even going to give them a break. Okay, we're hard-working folks at Astrobotic, guys.
No, extremely proud. The team should be extremely proud of themselves. It's been a fast road, a lot of setbacks, a lot of ups, lots of downs. The team took everything in their stride, and as you can see, achieved remarkable things. So proud of everybody, what they've done. Inspirational to everybody.
Yeah. And what's next for Astrobotic and NASA? You know, it seems like we're going back to the moon for a second time, huh?
It is. So once obviously successful completion of this mission, we have Griffin, which takes the Viper rover to the moon late 2024. Following that, we have as early as 2026, a tipping point where we do a demonstration of power transmission across the lunar surface. And also Astrobotic is part of the national team led by Blue Origin to take humans back to the moon, and we're part of the cargo lander system for them.
So a lot of things to look forward to.
Lots to look forward to, yeah.
And just by one last question for you, I mean, just what do you think of this new initiative that NASA has to really bring in all of these small U.S. companies to hopefully help us all go back to the moon?
This initiative is incredibly important. It allowed a small company like Astrobotic to actually deliver a lander to the moon. We'd have never been able to achieve it without that. But the best thing is it's bringing a lot more creative minds, new thinking to the table, and that will help us accelerate the technologies needed to get us back to the moon and have a robust resource and presence on the moon. So the more, it's very important for us to be there, and it's just helping us get there much faster.
Andy, thank you so much, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
And that's going to do it for us here at Kennedy Space Center. Thank you for sharing in the excitement of NASA's first CLIPS launch. Now on its own, the Peregrine spacecraft will coast for an expected arrival at the moon on February 23rd. And coverage of that landing, one of the first U.S. landings on the moon in over 50 years, that will be broadcast on NASA TV and NASA Plus. For those of you watching on ULA platforms, the ULA version of the simulcast will continue in a few moments as they await another milestone in this inaugural Vulcan flight. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We leave you now with a final look at today's historic launch.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have ignition. And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, launching a new era in spaceflight to the moon and beyond.
Both engines operating normally. 2 good SRBs, hitting peak pressure on the SRBs. Everything looking good.
270 meters in closing. Crew Dragon expected to converge with waypoint 1 directly in front of the International Space Station in less than 5 minutes. You can see the views right over the shoulders of Commander Shane Kimbrough and pilot Megan MacArthur. Kimbrough on the left, MacArthur on the right from that view.
From this view from the International Space Station, you can see what we were mentioning earlier, where Dragon was below the station. You could see that previously when it had Earth in the background. Now it is almost adjacent, or almost in the same orbit as the International Space Station, as it's making its way to the docking axis at waypoint 1.